Welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor and happy Bookmas Day 9. That is a very awkward 9. Today we're going to be doing the end of year book tag. This book tag was created by Destiny Sidwell a couple years back and I've been doing it ever since. I feel like most of Book Talk and Bookmas tends to do it every year. And man, do I have some opinions to say this year, so just trigger warning, opinions are loading. So if you and I have different taste in books, or if I have a bad or happy opinion on your favorite or least favorite book, you may want to click out now because we do not tolerate hate or aggressiveness on this channel. But I've got 19 questions in front of me. Every year I just copy the ones that I did last year, so I don't know if this has changed or altered over the years, and some of these will be a bit adjusted to my personal reading style. Like, for example, I don't really do rereads, but if I was going to reread a book in the new year, like what would that look like and stuff like that. And like for most quotable, those are just going to be my best writing because me remembering quotes. I can't remember character names most of the times. You want me to remember quotes? That's not going to happen. But I guess without further ado, let's hop into the end of the year book tag. First question is kind of starting out on a sour note. We have our most disappointing read of the year. This is The Gift by Frida McFadden. If you saw my first holiday reading vlog this season, you will see how much this book caused me anger. It caused me pure unadulterated rage. It was only an hour-long book, and by the time I got to the last 20 minutes, I'm just like, are you kidding me? But I'm like, I only have 20 minutes left. There's no reason not to finish it, but really I had every reason not to finish that book. This is The Gift of the Magi retelling, set in modern day, following a woman who's down on her luck, who's been recently married, and she wants to get her husband a great gift for their first Christmas as a married couple. This is a spoiler, I guess, but you know what? Spoiler warning, he is also a cheating man-child who deserves nothing, and she is an oblivious woman who may or may not take out a knife or two at Christmas time. So that's how it worked out. Really hated this. That's basically all I can say. Could have been contender for most frustrating read, but I saved another holiday read for that one because I think I've harped on about this book enough. Then we have Underdog Book of the Year. This is a book that came up and maybe surprised you, didn't get a lot of talk about. Maybe you just picked up and was just like, this looks like a fun read. And for me, that's Where There's Smoke by Erica Alexander. This is an indie published Black sapphic romance following a firefighter and her instant love at first sight attraction to the new baker in town, Angel. And of course, things ensue from there. This is very slice of life, very fast paced. I feel like these girlies did U-Haul a bit in the story. She's also quite spicy. She's fun. If you're looking for that sort of easy, spicy, little quirky sorts of read, this one's for you. Now, there are some harder topics addressed in this one, including one of the characters getting stuck in a fire. So if you're not a fan of that, maybe don't. But if you're also a fan of 911 on ABC, I'm just saying, this one's up the alley. Then we have A Book You Love But Don't Think About Now. So this is a book that at the time, it really caught your attention, caught your eye. Maybe it wasn't 5 stars, or maybe it was. But nowadays, you don't really necessarily go back and think about it too much. And for me, that was I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars, which y'all know for me is actually a little bit lower because, I tend to hand out 4.5 and 4.75 and 5 stars. Kind of like their candy. I had 15 5-star reads this year. I will say a lot of those were from the same series, so if you're clocking me, A. But I really enjoyed how this book addressed the topic of fame and parasocial relationships. We are following Angel and Jimmy. Jimmy's the lead singer of the ARC, and Angel is essentially the ARC's biggest online fan, and she is so excited to go to London for the first time and hang out with her online friends and go to the ARC concert for the first time in her life. But after a series of unfortunate events, Angel and Jimmy's paths cross for better and for worse, and they change their lives, So there's this brief moment of them meeting in time and how that dictates how their relationship and how Angel's relationship to, the ARC and Jimmy's relationship with fame changes. And it was just really well done. I just don't find myself going back and thinking about these Alice Oseman novels outside of Heartstopper very often. Probably because they got sadder the more I read on. So do check all sorts of trigger warnings for those 4 novels, because depression is a thing that they go through in nearly every one of them. Then we have our favorite book couples of the year. Now there was a lot to choose from. I settled on 3 for the year. So first off, we have Harriet and Nolan from Good Spirits. This is my favorite holiday read of the season. B.K. Borson Doesn't Let Me Down. And of course, the other, the second one is another B.K. Borson book. This is Business Casual, and this is Nova and Charlie. This is friends with benefits, sneaking around small town romance. It's also a little bit of an age gap. And then Good Spirits, the holiday romance. She is a quiet little Christmas mouse, and he is the ghost of Christmas past who's trying to figure out why on earth he's supposed to be haunting her. And of course, romance ensues from there. It's an always been you, fated, destined situation. These are great. But from my favorite romance of the year, I had to give my top favorite couple to Rome and Janelle from Only for the Week. This is essentially a vacation romance, and Only for the Week situation. Janelle agrees that she will, hear Rome out in a little spicy agreement for a week. He is the best man at her sister's wedding, and obviously she also has a past relationship with the groom, and all sorts of craziness and fun ensues. It's spicy, it's steamy. Rome is my top book boyfriend of the year, and I don't know what else to say other than I'm so excited, absolutely excited for the next book in this series, because I think it's already been announced, and I'll go over that in my most anticipated releases for 2026, which will be, I think, the next video you see. But those are my top book couples of the year. Then we have our non-stop recommendation, the book that I won't stop recommending. So this might be a bit of a cop-out, because everyone under the sun has been recommending this book since, I think 2008. I read The Hunger Games for the first time this year for Bookmas. Could not stop talking about this book. Could not stop talking about this. Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch live forever rent-free in my head. Why do I not include Gale? Because I am the world's #1 Gale hater, and frankly, I think the movies painted him in a better light than the books did. But yeah, I'm always going to recommend this because she has a lot to say in this book, and if you want to take the time to sit down and read it and really analyze everything that's going on with it, I think you'll take a lot away, especially given the current state of the U.S. government. Thus, I feel like in terms of YA dystopian genre, this really helped kickstart the huge trend in that genre and the popularity of the genre that took off, I feel like, in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I realize I'm not really giving any strong synopses of these books, but I have talked ad nauseum about most of these books, so I'm just kind of answering the questions. So the next question is most surprising read of the year, and that is New Adult by Timothy Janowski. This is surprising to me because I had softy enough this book twice. I just simply could not get into it or pick it up. It always came around at a time that I was in some sort of reading or life slump, but I finally sat down to read this. Now, this is a time travel romance, a queer 13 going on 30-esque retelling following Nolan Baker, who is trying to get his comedy career off the ground, but when he makes one bad decision the night of his sister's wedding, he wishes on some crystals, only to wake up when he is 30 and realize that his career is taken off, but his social life is kind of taken a dive. Now, time travel and me don't click. I don't like time travel. I generally do not like time travel in most instances. And y'all saying, but what about Endgame? I have my gripes with Endgame. I do love Endgame, but I have my gripes. But this book had no right making me feel the kinds of emotions that it did, because why was I tearing up? Why was I tearing up? Every day I keep thinking, why wasn't this a 5-star read? Why wasn't this a 5-star read? It was a 4.75 star. But you know what? It could have been 5-star if I was really feeling generous that day. But yeah, highly recommend this. Obviously, I've read a lot of Timothy Janowski this year. He's one of my Fav authors. I buy pretty much everything I see him come out with. And he does have a pretty long list of particularly holiday romances, queer romances, and I think he is entering the dark romance genre under a new pen name. So I might have to pick that up sometime soon. Then we have our new favorite authors, at least new to you favorite authors. So I have picked out 3. In the fantasy genre, I read R.F. Kuang for the first time this year. Her writing is just immaculate, or at least when it comes to the Poppy War series. And as someone who is also an academic, I feel like her discussions around academia really intrigue me, but I haven't read on further. Then we have Katie Zhao. I read Zodiac Rising this year. I just picked it up on a whim because it sounded like a good YA fantasy. I love a found family ensemble cast of characters with multiple POVs, and this one really delivered. I just picked up the sequel, and the ending of this book really drove it into that 5-star rating. I highly recommend, if you want just solid YA fantasy, this is a book that you need to read. And then, of course, I've talked about her. You're going to see her more than once. Natasha Bishop. Do I need to say more other than superior romance? It's a #1 romance book rec for life. This has entered my god tier romances. I don't know what else to say. So I will be picking up more from her in the coming year. So then we have our happiest read of the year. So the books that just made you kick, giggle, and scream. They may not have been 5 stars, but they just had that happy, giddy, girly feeling in your chest. For this one, I chose Flopping in a Winter Wonderland. Now, while I say this addresses hard topics, there is something about Jason June that no matter what, if you want a good pick-me-up, just cutesy, maybe sometimes cringy, really funny reads that have queer, and it's a queer romance, these are just, they're solid. They're solid. So in this book, we're following Chris and Aaron, and both of them have basically sworn off love or don't believe love exists. But when they both find themselves on the all-year Christmas theme park island of Winter Wonderland, they decide to strike up a deal in order to help each other with their respective problems. And then, of course, you know, romance ensues from there. And it made me giggle. It made me happy. It made me laugh. For happy reads, I will always recommend Jason June. He is just a go-to author if you want to feel some sort of level, like, giddiness, is what I will say. Moving on to less happy times, let's talk about my most frustrating read of the year. Now, I did talk about how much I disliked The Gift. Let me talk how much I dislike He Sees You When You're Sleeping. And yes, you're seeing a lot of holiday romances in this wrap-up. They're just at the front of my mind because I am still wrapping up my holiday reads for the year. I have one more to go. But He Sees You When You're Sleeping is a dark stalker romance that is set at the Christmas time. You're following Chloe and Jack. Chloe is an online luxury influencer with a secret online spicy persona, and Jack is the fireman that just can't seem to not stalk her. This book, every character pissed me off in some way or the other. I'm like, Jack, either commit to the stalker bit or don't. Because this man not only takes self-loathing to a new level, he's like, I really shouldn't, but I can't stop. I really shouldn't, but I can't stop. And it's just like, sir. And he like, And then Chloe over here is just like, if I had to hear the word vanilla one more time, she just like instantly judges people upon first impression, or just like the persona they necessarily like put out into the world, and doesn't take the time to really know them. And she's like, well, I've had so many issues with vanilla men who can't keep up with me. And then it really is, Chloe's just like this girl of like, I'm so much badder and like cooler than she actually is. Like I'm just like, girly, you got a lot of other issues to work through, and you say you don't want a Hallmark romance, but it also kind of looks like you just want a Hallmark romance just spiced up. It really didn't know whether it wanted to be a Hallmark romance or a dark romance, and frankly, IGNF this book a third of the way through because I was hate reading it by that point. So do not recommend, and I haven't seen the best reviews of everyone reading it this holiday season, so I think I'm in good company when I say skip this Then one. A little bookish stats. What was the longest book I read this year? Well, it ended up being Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland, and it came out to 576 pages. I read a couple of 500-page more, like over 500-page books this year. I just haven't necessarily been in the 500-page book grind. This is the sequel to Dread Nation, and essentially that first book in the duology answered the question of what would happen if the zombie apocalypse took place during the American Civil War, and now it's 15 to 20 years later, and the daughters of formerly enslaved individuals are now hired or assigned to be essentially zombie fighters, defenders of rich white people. And that's where I leave you off. It's queer, It tackles a lot of hard topics, and it's essentially a duology that's divided into 4 parts, and each part takes you on a journey. Takes you on a journey, and all I'm gonna say is for this book, just understand within the first 5 chapters, emotional devastation. Emotional devastation. Not that there isn't any lots of death in both books. However, I don't know that I saw that one coming. I saw it coming as we approach it in the chapters. I'm just like, come on. But yeah, it's an underrated duology that doesn't get much hype, and it's absolutely superior in my opinion. So what was the shortest book I read this year? So The Gift was the shortest book at 47 pages. However, I have already talked so much trash about that book. And I'm going to talk more trash later. So the second shortest book I read was My Boyfriends Are All Monsters by Kimberly Lemming, and that was 56 pages. I needed to talk about something happy and good and spicy and fun. Kimberly Lemming did this as a Kindle original for the Halloween season. You are following our FMC who is stranded on the side of a mountain after her no-good boyfriend decides to leave her there to her own devices, and then she gets swept up into this small town created purely from the imagination of the eternal being / god that's on the mountain, who just has determined that she will be his priestess, his fated mate, so on and so forth. And you will find out why there are tentacles on the cover, but I won't tell you later. I won't tell you any more other than that final chapter, chapter 6. She gets real delicious if you like a monster romance. Yeah, highly recommend this novella. Definitely don't recommend The Gift. Then we have a book that you haven't stopped thinking about. Now, I have a few books and series and characters that live rent-free in my head. However, as someone who is so invested in all sorts of media and stuff like that, I kind of bat between books, music, TV, film. Having watched Eternity in the last week, my brain was shot after. If you want a romance that'll absolutely make you bawl your eyes out, go watch Eternity. Not sponsored, but still. So for the book I chose North Ranger by Ray Terciero and illustrated by Brie Indigo. If you watch my Best of 2025 series over on TikTok, Reels, everything, you'll know that this was my favorite YA queer romance of the year. This is a graphic novel following Cade Muniz, who is a closeted queer teen who agrees to help his stepdad for the summer at his stepdad's former general ranch, and while he is there, he starts to form a relationship with the general's son, who's also another closeted queer teen. And this book made me go through every spectrum of emotions, from like crying to wanting to throw something across the throw the book across the room, to being happy and giggly. And I don't know if it's the most satisfying ending. However, it made me give it 5 stars. The whole last, I don't know how many pages, I would say at least the last 10% of this book just had me going, yep, 5 stars. Nothing else it has to be 5 stars. Then we have an unpopular book that you love. So I take this to be a book that just doesn't get as much hype as it deserves. And there's lots of books and lots of authors. Particularly, I like to hype up queer authors on this channel, and I'm going to hype up Jenna Voris again because the fact that no one is reading her is absolutely pissing me off. I've heard a couple of, book talkers and booktubers who focus solely on queer works talk her up, but the general masses just don't seem to talk her up as much as I think she did. How many times can I say that phrase? Say a Little Prayer is following Riley. She is a bisexual teen in a very conservative town, and after getting into a little brawl with her elder sister's ex-best friend in the hallways at school, she agrees to go to church camp for a week in order to avoid missing play rehearsals as part of her detention. But while she's at church camp, she says she commits herself to committing all 7 deadly sins in 7 days, while also fighting her attraction for her best friend / the preacher's daughter. And yes. This does talk a lot around religion in relation to queer identity and religious trauma and so on and so forth. But yeah, Jenna Voris just makes really good, solid YA sapphic stories. My favorite that I've read so far, which I've only read 2, is Every Time You Hear That Song, but this is definitely up there, and I think more people should be talking about it. Then we have our highest versus our lowest rated. My top book of the year is Only for the Weak by Natasha Bishop. Who could have guessed by the amount of times I've read this year? It's my top romance. It's my top book. What my top fantasy of the year is, I'm not 100% sure, but this is a solid standout. And then my least favorite, who could have guessed? The Gift by Frida McFadden. I don't like to dwell on things that I don't like, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. Then we have our most quotable book. Now, I mentioned in the intro, do I remember quotes? Absolutely not. So for me, this is the book that has the most either lyrical or like complex writing to it. The Popular by R.F. Kuang. Who could have guessed? Listen, R.F. Kuang and Olivia Blake belong in a tier of like authors who they take me a while to get through, but their writing is in fact so unique and so interesting and so well done that you can't help but go back and be like, that was a great book. Like, that was a solid book. Even if it's something that's not necessarily inside your realm of like understanding or like favorite genres and favorite genres and so on and so forth. The Poppy War is the first book in a trilogy, and we're following Rin. She is a war orphan who tests into the best military academy in Nicara, and while she's there, she gets treated badly for essentially being poor, being of a different accent, a slightly different race, or like origin than the other kids, so on and so forth. And during her time there, war breaks out in Nicara again, and she starts to discover her own mystical, magical abilities, but also what it means to be at war and the hard decisions that you have to make. There are characters in this story that had an arc, including Grin herself, that make you go, I'm like, I hate you, I love you, I don't know how I feel about this, babes. I'm like, was that a decision you really wanted to make? I don't know. But I'm excited to pick up The Dragon Republic, which is the second book in the series. Then we have our most unique concept or unique book that you read this year. Now, I feel like there were a lot of concepts that I picked up. I'm like, you're a little different. You're a little off the beaten path, something that I hadn't seen before. But the book that I chose to spotlight this year is Long Live Evil by Sarah Reese Brennan. So this does have elements of stories that you might have seen before. I always say if you like Assistant to the Villain, you may like this story, but it's just so unique in how it goes about its story and how it forms these elements. So in this book, you're following Ray. She's a 20-year-old girl who's been battling cancer for the last 3 years, and she is essentially knocking on death's door. But one night, a ghostly being hops into her room and strikes a bargain with her. She's like, if you can enter the realm of your favorite fantasy book series, Time of Iron, and steal this mystical, magical flower, I don't know if there's a timeline on that can heal anything. Not only will it heal you, it'll bring you back to the real world and you can live your life on as you please. The only thing is when she is thrust in this story, she is put into the character of the evil stepsister, and she decides to, put together her merry little evil crew. And yeah, when I was filming my queer book battle of the year, I had this on there. You'll never see that video because it technical difficulties, corrupt files, and so on and so forth. But yeah, even though Ray herself is not queer, nearly every side character in this book that you follow and get POVs from is queer. So yeah. I will say I have to spoil this. There is a scene in here where they essentially perform a musical number, and I don't cringe a lot. But I was like thrown back to a Riverdale-esque musical number, and I'm like, that's what kept it from a 5-star. It was a 4.5 star, but it was like, ooh. So if you don't like modern language or modern references in your fantasy book, maybe look away. This may not be for you. Then we have a book that you're most likely to reread in the coming year, or, that you would have reread this year. I generally don't reread. I reread books more as a kid. But nowadays, I feel like with time management and everything and just the channel in general, I don't go out of my way to reread books. But if I were to reread one, Saint Seducing Cold by Brittany N. Williams. This is the second book in the Forge and Fracture saga. I read the first book last year, this book this year, and the third book is out, which is Iron of Midnight, I think is what it's called. I do plan on buying it sometime in the beginning of the next year to finish out the trilogy. If I was someone to reread the books and series before the new book comes out, I would probably reread this one. It's one of my favorite trilogies of all time. It is set in Shakespearean England, and you're following Joan Sands, who's been gifted the power to conjure iron at will, and it is the only metal that is that can mortally wound Fae. And when the accords between Fae and humans are broken, she's the only one who stands in the way of the Fae, taking over London. What is our best adaptation this year? Now, there have been a lot of adaptations that I have loved, and I am happily awaiting Bridgerton Season 4 to come out in January. And normally for this, I end up picking books adaptations that I haven't read the books for. In this case, it's Heated Rivalry. We've only made it through episode 4 at the time of me filming this. I have bought the books on Kindle. I will be reading them soon. Like I said, still making it through my holiday TBR. But Jacob Turney, masterpiece of a show. It's only gonna make me feel more things, and I know the last 2 episodes are going to ruin me. Episode 5 comes out very late. What is today? Wednesday? Comes out late tomorrow night. I'll probably end up watching it on Friday. Yeah. Everyone on their mama on Book Talk and on Reaction Talk and everything has been screaming its praises from the rooftops. I don't think I need to say any more other than if you're looking for spicy and gay, this one is for you. There's also definitely some trauma discussed. I'm sure they'll get more into that in season 2 from what I've heard. But yeah, just do understand that there is a little bit of in there. Then what are our reading goals for the upcoming years and our reflection on this past year? So reflection on this past year, I think I have finally rediscovered the joy of reading again. I feel like ever since the end of 2024, going into this year, I've just been fighting off a massive reading slump on top of a massive life slump. I think it's mostly a life slump because, listen, starting from the election of last year, quitting my not-so-great job, trying to find a job this year, on top of all the grief and loss that I experienced this year, I'm like, nope, no. Yeah, I feel like finding the new joy in reading or rediscovering your love of reading. I also think I've come to the conclusion that while I have so many fantasy books, but there's just something about a very fluffy, lighthearted romance, maybe with some slightly more heartwarming elements to it that, is maybe a little filthy, maybe a little funny, and all that just brings me joy. And I think till the end of time, I'm going to be a romance first girly. So if you're coming to the channel, it's romance first, it's queer stories first as much as I can. I read less books this year so far. So as far as I can see, I read 77 books as of today, December 17th. I don't know what my number will end up being, but I read over 80 last year and over 90 the year before. So yeah, obviously we want to prioritize quality over quantity, but I'm also not that much of a harsh reader. So going into the new year, my goal every year is 50 books. If my young self could do it, like I read close to 100 books as a 10-year-old. I went to a school that really heavily pushed reading, the accelerated reading program, and I know I read that. So if I can do that as a kid, 50 books is I usually finish 50 books by halfway through the year. During the fall semester, as I'm working at the school, it tends to get a little more hectic. So then my first goal is to read more sapphic books as well as read more trans and gender diverse books. Sapphic books, I think I put this on here last year, as well as the trans and diverse books. I'm just looking, well, I think I did better this year. I feel like I just didn't have as many. I think predominantly, white queer men overtook my queer reading, which I think is a norm for a lot of people, and I'm trying to make sure I have lots of reads because I feel like everyone talks about this. It feels like finding good sapphic representation, particularly in books, is sometimes hard to do, especially in the mainstream. So I've seen some video recommendations, so I'm excited to dive into those. And obviously, we will be back in March for the Trans Rights Readathon. I've already got books lined up for that, so keep that in mind. Then I have Buy Less and Read More. Will I stick to this? Who knows? I did just buy 6 more books. One of those books I have already started reading, so we'll see. But we're trying to be a little more responsible with our money. I'm not going to say, I'm actually pretty responsible with my money. I'm quite good at budgeting and everything. But sometimes when I get in a bookish mood, I get a little blinders on. And then the last one is to finish series. I feel like I've started a lot of series. This is my thing. I'm the kind of person who just generally doesn't read series back to back. I sometimes get burnt out on series if I read them back to back. That's why I'm not a binge TV watcher. Like, if once I like lose interest or get bored, which will inevitably happen if I'm stuck on something for a long time, you know what? I'm gonna drop out, or I'm just not gonna continue for the moment, which leads to me being in the middle of a lot of series, which, I don't necessarily care as much as other people, but I would like to finish the full length series that I already own, like Caraval or Shadow and Bone and stuff like that. Reading all the Hunger Games back to back, now I really enjoyed it, but by the time I got to the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I don't know if you could tell, I was like ready to tap out. I'm worn out, babes. I'm worn out, babes. And I didn't want that to taint my enjoyment of Sunrise on the Reaping. But we're going to try and finish more series in the new year. And in terms of channel goals, I'm starting a new full-time job at the beginning of January. So I'm going to still try to upload weekly as much as I can. But you may see a shift in the amount of reading and the type of content just based on what I am able to film and edit in the time allotted to me while I am working. So, plus I still have 2 classes alongside that full-time job that I am teaching that I need to have planned out. So yeah, but that was my full end of the year book tag. Let me know if you align with me on some of these, if you have some different opinions or recommendations, or if you just took away a great book recommendation that you're like, I haven't heard of that one before, or like I've been thinking about it, but now I'm ready to pick it up or not pick it up. And I will see y'all in the next Bookmas video.